Hi again. Ron Klaus here for our wrap-up talk. I've called this one, How Do We Answer the Big Questions of Life? In my last talk, I tried to give you an idea about what we can and can't know about our universe, particularly about its origin. We do not and can never know from science whether there was something or someone outside the universe that got it going. We've been able to discover a great deal about our universe, but the details of its origin seem to be forever hidden from us. I would like to pursue this one step further. Its mysteries get even deeper. The universe cooled and condensed out of its original fireball, consisting of nothing but random radiation, that is, photons moving at many different speeds in random directions. But as it condensed, all the laws of physics started to take over. Where did they come from? Not only that, but 6 important and independent physical constants were set with very close tolerances that were required to be that way for life to emerge. The large amounts of carbon and oxygen among the chemical elements found in the universe depend on a very unlikely coincidence in the structure of their atomic nuclei as well as that of helium. This discovery so amazed astrophysicist Fred Hoyle, who discovered it, that it is said that he had a mystical experience and was quoted as saying, "Some super intellect has monkeyed with the universe." Getting down to life, it has now been shown that even the simplest living cell is amazingly complicated. Its membrane has thousands of microscopic doors that carefully control what goes into the cell and what comes out of it. When researchers tried to model simpler cells by eliminating their genes one by one to see how well the cell can cope, they found that they can never eliminate more than about half their genes before the cell can't live at all. But for every gene they eliminate, the cell's environment has to have more and more complex substances in it because the cell can no longer make what it needs to live. But in a prebiotic universe, where would these highly complex molecules come from? When atheist biologist Richard Dawkins was asked how life began, his honest answer was, "We have no idea." It has been pointed out that in the past 25 years there have been amazing advances in almost every field of biology, but despite some highly exaggerated newspaper claims, the origin of life biology is exactly where it was 25 years ago. We have no idea. Physicist Paul Davies, in his book The Goldilocks Enigma, Why is the Universe Just Right for Life, concluded, it is not possible that the universe was formed by chance. So, where we are in that, we can't know how the universe began, and in addition, there are a multitude of coincidences in its formation and huge complexity about the beginnings of life. And I've only scratched the surface of these kinds of things, so much so that many sophisticated observers have concluded that something really strange has been going on. One observer put it this way, the universe knew we were coming. But now let's switch gears. Science has helped us make great progress in human well-being. But we've already shown that it can't tell us everything. So let's talk about ethics, the way we ought to behave toward one another. An atheist philosopher named David Hume challenged the philosophical community to show how science can give us information about ethics. He pointed out that science can tell us what is, but not what ought to be. No one has ever answered this challenge. What this points to, and what I'd like us to think about through this talk, is how then do we answer the big questions of life? Knowing all about the universe is fine, but we have some more immediate pressing questions to answer. Let me list just a few of them. First, who am I? Am I just an accident of nature? Do I have any purpose or meaning? If so, how do I find it? Am I worth anything? Am I attractive, even lovable? And then, what about God? Is there anyone or anything outside the physical universe? If so, what is he, she, or it like? Is it possible to know and experience him, her, or it? And if so, how do we do it? How do we know we are on the right path to discovering him, her, or it? Is this even important to know? Are there benefits it would bring us or consequences if we don't? And then, what's wrong? Something in the world, and maybe even in ourselves, doesn't seem right. Why is that? How and where did we get off the true path? Who's to blame? And how much responsibility do we have for this personally? And then, what should we do? Is there a way out of our problems? What can we do to make things better? How much of this effort falls on our own shoulders? And then, how shall we live? What should be our ethics and morals? What should we do with our lives? How much effort should we spend helping others and making the world a better place? And finally, where are we going? How is everything going to end? Is there a life beyond this one? I want to point out that 5 minutes after we die, this will be the most important question of our lives. If death is the end of us, many of us think that that would be disappointing. Well, at least there would be no more questions. But what if death is not the end? What would such a life after death be like? What can we know about that? And how do we know if we were right? These are just a core group of many important questions that we're all going to have to wrestle with. I know that the present trend is mostly to ignore them and just hope for some satisfaction out of this life and then hope for the best for the future. But we're all going to face these questions sometime or other. Maybe the ultimately most pressing one is about death. When I was much younger, I had a more unconscious feeling of immortality. Sickness and premature death were for other people, not me. That was until my mother died prematurely. And now as I see friends dying one at a time to what seems a steady beat, it is feeling more and more ominous. Now a lot older, I can already hear the Grim Reaper sharpening his sickle. I know that I have a lot more years behind me than before me. Two of my big questions now are, did I do the right things with the years that are behind me? And what do I do with the relatively few that are left? So where do we go to get answers for these kind of questions? I've already told you that I love science and I'm still doing it. But I hope I've also helped you understand that science alone is not going to be too helpful in answering these big questions. So what are our other options? I think there are only three. The first is from philosophy. We're greatly indebted to the Greek philosophers who taught us to think logically. We can now reason one way from one thing to another. But here's the problem. Where you end up depends on two things. What are your starting assumptions, and is your reasoning sound? For example, you can start with the assumption that Rousseau made that pre-civilized people are basically good, and it was society that corrupted them. Or you can start with the idea that pre-civilized people were very self-centered and even violent, and civilization's restrictions are intended to limit evil and exploitation. Hopefully they help people put limits on their selfish impulses. Where you come out on what society should be doing now depends a lot on which of these two places you start with. So if you're looking for philosophy to guide you, a lot depends on whose philosophy you start with and how much you buy into that philosopher's reading. A second approach is what I call the wing it approach. The idea is just to try to be decent and respectful, certainly non-judgmental. Try to get pleasure and satisfaction out of life without hurting anyone. Don't be too set on a given set of morals. Go with the flow. This is the easiest option, and in our day, the one most people are taking. Some of you listening to me are probably already in that groove. You'll tend to stay there because once you have life's necessities, it's the easiest option. It's not very difficult or morally challenging. However, in my view, it doesn't seem to be working as well as we hoped. It's causing many relational problems because your ethics may not be someone else's, and then we don't know what to do. We're seeing the result of this choice in our highly fractured culture and our many relational problems. Many couples who instinctively pair up often wind up disillusioned and then split up. Over my lifetime, I've noticed a distinct decline in the number of couples that can maintain a good relationship over time. And that's just about them. The problems that their children face with breakups and problems between their parents are becoming increasingly evident. On Saturday morning, in one of my special breakfasts out with my daughter, she was very exercised. She told me about a question one of her teachers had asked in a class of about 30 students. How many of you are living now with both your biological parents? My daughter said that only she and one other student raised their hands. Her deep concern about that told me a lot about her fear that my wife and I might someday get divorced. I know this is only one data point, but I've seen a lot of others. They aren't encouraging. Nevertheless, this wing-it approach is the option that most people today are choosing, and you might be one of them. Then I think the only remaining alternative is to look toward religion. But again, whose religion? And how much do I need to buy into? And how do I know if I've made the right choice? Interestingly, more of the world is religious than non-religious, although that trend is changing. The problem for us is the multiplicity of religions. Which of them, if any, is right? Many of us have grown up in homes that are in some sense religious. We all then start off either attracted to our parents' religion if we experience its benefits, or repelled and want to abandon it and find another one, or perhaps none at all if it isn't appealing. So let me say just a few things about religion in general, because there are some important differences between it and the other choices. Similar to other choices, if we're even considering this option, we usually start with a critical evaluation of religion that might be a candidate for us. But if you do such an evaluation, please talk to its best thinkers and don't knock down straw men. For example, if I've heard it once, I've heard many people say, "I can't believe in a God who would allow all the suffering that there is in the world." They often say this as though they were the first person to see this problem, or as though no religious person has ever been bothered by this, let alone responded to it. For thousands of years, practitioners of every religion have faced this question and come up with a variety of answers. There are tons of material about this, and every other philosophical question that has ever been asked about any religion you can think of. So if you're evaluating a religion, at least have the decency to listen to thinking practitioners about these questions before you write off that religion. A final point about religion is that unlike other areas, you can't make a fair evaluation of any religious system unless you become a seeker. In other words, your choice can't be just an intellectual exercise. You have to try it before you buy it. I know someone who once told me that he had become a Buddhist. I was fascinated by this because you don't find Westerners turning to Buddhism. So I asked him what that meant for him. He said it's about learning to meditate. I said, "And why did you decide to become a Buddhist and learn their particular version of meditation?" He said, "Because I tried it and it worked for me. I felt a deep peace come into me as I learned to meditate." That's one example of trying to see how it fits. I also know a woman from an agnostic background who became a follower of Jesus. She was a professor at a university in my city, and I was also a fellow academic, although at a different university. Again, I was interested because I know very few professors who go down that road. So I also asked her why and how she made that decision. She told me that she began to read the Bible, then talked to someone about her many questions, and eventually got to the point where it seemed to be a reasonable faith and make sense. Then she said she took some time to pray every morning. I asked her how she prayed, especially since she was not yet convinced that God even existed. She smiled and said her prayers went something like this. "I don't know if anyone is hearing this, but just in case, God, if you are there, please let me experience you in some way. I want to know if you are real or not." I asked her how all this went. She said it took a while. I was reading my Bible every day. For a while I wasn't experiencing anything. But one day as I was praying like this, it felt like Jesus walked into my room. It was that real. And I felt he said to me, "How much longer are you going to hold out on me?" And I felt myself answering, "Not 1 minute longer." She told me that was her transition. She said that since then she never doubted God's reality. I don't say that these kind of things happen quite that way to every seeker. But it seems to me that some real encounter like this has to happen to every seeker if he or she has ever become a practitioner of any religion. So here's where we are. We have some big questions to answer. We can turn either to science or philosophy, or else try to wing it, or else turn to religion. As far as I can tell, these are the only options we have. I hope you'll all think about them very carefully. A lot of our lives, and perhaps even what happens after them, depends on them. Well, that wraps this up. Thanks for hanging in there with me for these few talks. Best wishes to all of you, and bye for now.